Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to the channel where we talk about economics and crypto and lots of other fun things. Do me a favor, hit that like button, leave a comment in the comment section, hit the subscribe button if you have not already. We have a banger for you today. Now, here's the deal. I'm going to start off with a potentially bearish chart here, bearish information, and then I'm going to move on to lots of bullish things. I never promise you that I'm just only going to show you bullish stuff. I have plenty of reasons to be bullish right now, except for one thing that I'm about to show you in this particular chart, and this is from Alpha Ractal. And what do we see here? Short-term holders are no longer accumulating Bitcoin. Distribution is back. Oh no, does that mean that Bitcoin has peaked? Well, let's read this, and I want to give some thoughts as to maybe, but maybe not. And my bet is, as of right now, at least, that Bitcoin did not peak at $112,000. Okay, so the recent surge in Bitcoin's price has pushed short-term holders to start distributing their coins, but what does this mean for the market? Historically, when the short-term holder supply starts to decline, Bitcoin tends to be near major cycle tops. In other words, as the price increases, demand slows down while selling pressure rises, a classic sign that the bull cycle is entering its final stages. Currently, the short-term holder realized price sits at 94.5K, acting as the final support base until this group goes underwater, holds at a loss again. Meanwhile, the long-term holder realized price is 33K and rising, showing a clear behavioral divergence between long-term and short-term investors. Whenever on-chain curiosity, whenever the short-term holder realized price crosses above the long-term holder realized price, it has signaled the beginning of a new bull market. We'll see that in the next chart. That's very, very important. Something you should be very excited about when the time comes. So this has signaled the beginning of a new market every single time. This demonstrates the power of on-chain analytics. Important note, despite current short-term holder distribution, it's worth noting that in 2021, Bitcoin still managed to reach new all-time highs even with this behavior. There's still room for upside, but macro on-chain signals and the systemic halving cycle suggest a significant correction could begin after October 2025. I disagree strongly with that last point. But looking at this chart, I looked at this chart. I was trying to figure out, is there any time historically when we would see short-term holders not accumulating? We'd see a peak in accumulation to where we still saw Bitcoin go higher. I mean, we do have this period at the end of 2021 where you can see short-term holder distribution or short-term holder accumulation peaked and we entered into distribution, and we were well into distribution when Bitcoin hit a new all-time high at $69,000 in November of 2021. But then 2017, big spike up in short-term holder accumulation and then distribution. Same deal for 2013. So we don't really have a time historically when short-term holder accumulation would stop and Bitcoin then went to higher prices short-term. So what does that mean for this time around? Well, I mean, you can see here, what about early to mid-2024? There was a peak and then a leveling off, and then Bitcoin's price leveled off, and then there was a significant dump before a rise higher. And so is this time different? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves. Well, let me ask you this question. What is different about this peak in short-term holder accumulation versus previous peaks is, well, let me just say it like this. We are nowhere near any sort of excitement in the market, any sort of euphoria. These several peaks here, these significant peaks, 2013, 2017, 2021, marked periods of peak absolute pandemonium. And we are just not there right now. So I do think that there's probably something different about this time around, but it is worth paying attention to, is worth keeping on your radar. If we are going to struggle to break through 112, that maybe this is a local top, and maybe we would see something like what we saw in 2021 where, all right, we'd have a breather for a little bit before moving higher again. But something to keep on your radar. Now, I do want to share with you some bullish stuff, but actually, before I do that, here is this very, very key point that this tweet was talking about, is when do you buy Bitcoin again? Okay, there is a specific time when you buy Bitcoin, and that is when short-term holder realized price crosses back over long-term holder realized price. That marks the end of the bear market. Now, when should you buy? Really, you should buy when it crosses over to the downside. Short-term holder realized price crosses over to the downside of the long-term holder realized price. That would be closer to the bottom. But then when we cross back over to the upside, that marks the bear market is just straight up over. So accumulate when you see the short-term holder realized price cross over the long-term holder realized price. And then for sure, your accumulation should be close to being done around the time that it crosses back over the long-term holder realized price. That's a very simple tactic for buying in the bear market. And if you did that last time around, you would be up something like 6x from where you bought in. Maybe even more than that, actually much more than that. So anyway, let's move on to some very bullish stuff now. From Pentoshi, worth 9 figures. One of my go-to people. I have a hard time disagreeing with him. So here's a tweet from Pentoshi. I'd only be concerned for Bitcoin if we lost this and started to close under the previous all-time high closes and range highs. Absolute worst case IMO would be mid-90s. For now, we are trading above, so bias should be continuation. This is my base case. Bias should be continuation until we see any sign of weakness, and we just have not seen that yet. It is too early to call. Even then, I don't think there's enough supply to stay down for long at the rate it's being gobbled up. ETFs have that gluck 3000 going. I have no idea what he means by that, and are sucking supply dry, absolutely milking it. And the same with Sailor. The printers never truly stop. So we are in an uptrend. And until we see weakness, until we see a lower high or lower low, I'm going to assume that we're going to remain in an uptrend. And speaking of the ETFs, since Trump won the election 200 days ago, ETFs and public companies have taken 607,000 Bitcoin off the market. We're talking about like half a year. Where how much of that of the supply is that? That's a significant amount of supply, 607,000. That's 3% of the supply has been taken off the market. Rough numbers, we can see 200K from ETFs, unbelievably 300K from MicroStrategy, and 100K from other public companies. At this rate, a supply shock is coming. Everyone is swapping fiat for digital gold. You are not bullish enough. Okay, I mean, I'm never going to say one of those things. You are not bullish enough. But you can see, just I've been paying attention to this. The spot Bitcoin ETF flow here, they have just been buying and accumulating Bitcoin. We have not seen any sign of a slowdown with that yet. There was one red day, May 13th. Otherwise, it has been mostly, for the most part, well over $100 million worth of Bitcoin bought per day. That is more than the amount of Bitcoin mined per day. It's sometimes a significant amount. So more to that. Wow. Okay. Bitcoin news, Bitcoin news.com, new Bitcoin capital flows could exceed 120 billion by the end of 2025, 300 billion in 2026 per Bitwise. US spot Bitcoin ETFs attracted over 36.2 billion in net inflows during 2024, outperforming expectations and exceeding early Spider Gold shares performance by 20x. So look at the significance of this. This is super annoying, FYI. So the gold colored bar, really bitcoinnews.com, the gold colored bar is Bitcoin and the gray one is Blackcoin. Come on, really? But you can see year one of spot Bitcoin ETF flows in terms of dollars, 36.2 billion, more than 20x the amount of flows of the gold ETF. And here's projections for 2026, 2027. We'll see, but you can compare that to year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, and year 7 of gold ETF flows. And I have on the next page here a chart of here's year 1. Here, this blue bar here, if you're looking at it, November of 2004, was the day of the gold ETF launch. And then the next blue bar is year 2, next one's year 1, the first year, after the launch, the second year after the launch, the third year after launch, and moving on. And you can see how much gold's price increased as a result of these purchases of gold through the ETFs. And we're talking about a number in the millions. We're talking about a much less significant number of gold GLD shares being bought. And yet the effect on gold's price, is this correlation or causation? There's some cause. There's some causation here. It's not just straight up like this is only because of the GLD ETF, but it certainly helped. But here's what happens when gold is accumulated and the gold price goes up is that mining increase. There's more of an incentive to mine gold. And so what happens is that the gold supply increases. You can't do that with Bitcoin. And so what happens if next year we see, my goodness, over $50 billion worth of Bitcoin bought? I can't do the math real quick. I'm not going to pull out the calculator, but I'm willing to bet I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was more than the value of Bitcoin mined. And what if the following year we saw over $60 billion worth of Bitcoin bought? Will we break to the upside? Eventually, I would say probably this decade, Bitcoin will break to the upside and diminishing returns will no longer be a thing. Guys, you got to be accumulating Bitcoin. And I am even of this mindset, even I don't care about the bear market. Like, I want to accumulate Bitcoin even now with Bitcoin over $100,000. At some point, you got to forget about those altcoins, man. I'm telling you. You're going to, you and I am lumping myself in this. I am going to one day look back with a great deal of regret at how little Bitcoin I bought in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, that I should have just bought more Bitcoin. Let's just do it now. Can we just do it now, please? All right, moving on, we have from Glassnode. We're seeing some signs of distribution among the 10K plus cohort, but still heavy accumulation of every other cohort. Now, this is long-term holders. This is holders of, it's short-term and long-term holders. So long-term holders are accumulating more than Bitcoin. Another reason why maybe this time's different. Maybe that long-term holders are still accumulating. They're outpacing short-term holders in their accumulation, but the larger than 10K cohort is distributing at the moment. It's not super heavy in distribution. It is some level of distribution. I am still of the opinion, I've talked about this chart in previous videos, that after this long period of distribution here that we see in all cohorts, that we're going to enter some kind of a phase of blue, and that this is probably just a blip with the 10K cohort, but we'll see. We shall see, shall we not? Moving on. We have Bitcoin. What's the plan from Swissblock here? Bitcoin is preparing its decoupling. Are we actually going to decouple this time? It's actually, if we're going to see Bitcoin go off into the heights, we need it. We desperately need it to decouple from the stock market. On-chain drivers now dominate. Macro and TradFi still admire, but Bitcoin is now driven more by fundamentals than external noise. It's playing its own game in its own league. Bitcoin market sensitivity has flipped on-chain. Macro is background noise. On-chain fundamentals are steering price. And so we're seeing more of a movement away from other areas, of just Bitcoin being its own thing. In many ways similar to gold. Gold is its own thing. We have a reply here from somebody who I highlighted recently, Quinton.eth, Bitcoin funding rates look incredibly healthy. No leverage, no hype, cleanest setup in years. Another reason why I would say short term to be bullish on Bitcoin. Greed is just not in this market with Bitcoin at $110,000. It's wild, man. This is unlike any other period we have ever experienced. A reason again why maybe this time's different. But moving on. Okay, retire. Are we here? Retire on one Bitcoin. Sell $10,000 per month starting on January 1st, 2035. So this from Stack Wisely is hypothesizing, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. That starting on January 1st, 2035, if you own one Bitcoin, you would be able to sell $10,000 worth of that Bitcoin every month for the rest of your life. Maybe, is that possible? I would say definitely it's possible. If we get to the point where we're in 2035 and we have one Bitcoin, am I going to be selling my some of my Bitcoin? Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. But what a concept to believe in. I believe the number by 2030 is 4 Bitcoin. So maybe by 2040, it would be something like half a Bitcoin. But it is still somewhat attainable. It should be something that you should be striving for, in my opinion, to at least have one Bitcoin. But personally for me, I want much more than one Bitcoin. Time is running short. It's a lot more difficult, obviously, now than it was in, when was that? At any point previous to when it is now. So moving on, a couple of conflicting charts, but hopefully we're decoupling. So Bitcoin Magazine Pro, the reduction in the Federal Reserve balance sheet seems to be concluding, potentially signifying the resumption, of quantitative easing in the not too distant future. It's not a matter of if, but when, and when this pivot comes, you don't want to be sidelined. That sounds super bullish. Okay, you're seeing certainly a reduction in the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. Is that balance sheet going to flip positive soon? It most likely is. It certainly is. I mean, we're already seeing the Treasury buying lots of treasuries, of bonds. And so on a net level, when you factor in the Federal Reserve and other factors, we are in a phase of easing, but the Federal Reserve balance sheet is still declining to the tune of $5 billion a month as of now. So is that bullish? Is that super bullish? Bitcoin's going to go to the moon now that the Federal Reserve is flipping green soon-ish. Well, here's a different perspective. Gume Tvarez, I've shared lots of his charts, and let's throw some rain on this parade. Is this, 3 years in advance, U.S. Central Bank balance sheet 3 years in advance? You can see some level of correlation here. What I would like to highlight, though, is come on, look at 2021. S&P 500 significantly deviated from the Fed balance sheet in 2021, but ever since then we've been kind of correlated. So does this mean that the S&P 500 is now going to go down in comparison? I mean, we could have another 2021 scenario ahead of us, and then eventually some kind of reversion to the mean. But I mean, even look at the bottom in 2022, it didn't get anywhere near the Fed balance sheet. But maybe this is it. Maybe this is something. It's something to pay attention to, that we are nearing a top of sorts with the S&P 500, although we can still have another year or so of a 1998 type scenario where it looked like it was over in 1998, but then we bounced right back and had a final blow off top in the stock market, and then it was over. That's kind of my perspective, that would be the best case scenario, but we shall see. Last post, may interest only me, from Michael A. Arrowet here. We can see intergenerational wealth. The only benefit of declining education standards is that many millennials can't understand this chart. Otherwise, they would become angry. So we can see share of national wealth owned by each generation by median cohort age. Baby boomers, the entire peak of American civilization, American at least, is centered around the baby boomers. My goodness. When they were 35 years old, they held, on average, they held more than 20% of the wealth of the United States, at least. And in 2019, it was closer to 55 to 60%. And you can see Gen X is way behind that. They were under 10% at the age of 35. Here they are in their mid 40s in 2019, or at least they were in 2019, owning less than 20% still. And millennials are even behind Generation X, Gen X. So here's the deal. I am a much older millennial, to the point where I might as well just be in Gen X. And guys, stop it. If you are a millennial, do not become angry. Stop making excuses. The world is your oyster. There are plenty of opportunities to do just fine today, and you can do it. I'm not going to make a boomer comment about just some hard work and determination. You got to think differently. Just come on. You have plenty of opportunities today to outpace yourself from other people in your generation. So do it. Do it. Okay, Bitcoin right now, $110,000. Bitcoin dominance at the moment I'm making this video, at least. Bitcoin dominance, guys, we got to do something here, man. We are right at the 702. Could we get, swing low, swing high here up to the 786 and then get rejected there? But if we're going to put in a higher high, we're going to go higher from here with Bitcoin dominance. My goodness, our stupid altcoins. And we don't deserve. If you bought altcoins expecting alt season, I'm telling you right now, do I expect significant gains? Do I expect gains with altcoins? Yes, but you don't deserve anything Stop being entitled. You don't deserve a thing. You bought something that you know is worthless. Expecting somebody else to be the sucker. Maybe you're the sucker, but I'm expecting a move down in Bitcoin dominance. So let's just take this one day at a time, see where we go from here. Anyway, that is all I have for today. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful rest of your week, and I will most certainly be seeing you in another video. Peace.